Okay.
Okay. Bring them
Starting.
all. Welcome. Happy Friday. I'm
I
really
was gonna
feeling the TGIF today.
I
Oh
was gonna say good morning, everybody, and then I realized those on the the East Coast it's already
my gosh, did I
lunchtime.
say? I was saying that. I always say good morning accidentally and forget that we're all
Hmm.
over the US. So welcome. I
Yes.
just launched a poll just to get this webinar going. Please feel free to pop in. Tell us how old your baby is, where you're located, and
Mhm.
we'd love to hear what your favorite food is, just for some fun. And we'll get started here in a minute.
Thank you guys for spending some of your Friday with us. We're so excited.
So excited. We had some amazing RSVPs for this, so we're really excited to see who comes today.
You
Let's
know,
see.
I'm always
All right.
impressed when people with babies register and come to things like this because it's so hard to schedule when you have a baby, like to know what you're doing on Friday at noon or whatever. And so I always appreciate it so much when you guys make the time and make the effort to come join us for these. So we're excited you're here. We'll get started in just a minute or two while we let everybody roll in.
Perfect. Love it. Yeah, what is your favorite food, Mallory? Putting you on the
Oh
spot.
man. Okay, this I don't know that I could tell you like my overall favorite food, but I'll tell you a recent one, which is that just yesterday, for the first time in probably like 6 years, I bought Snickers ice cream bars. And
Oh,
it was so good. When I was pregnant with my son, I had gestational diabetes. And for some reason, the Snickers ice cream bar, the combination of like the protein and the fat and whatever, I could eat a Snickers ice cream bar and it wouldn't spike my blood sugar. And so when I was pregnant, that was like my go-to treat. And now my son is 6 and I haven't had one since until yesterday. And it was so lovely.
oh my
A little
gosh, that's
nostalgic, a little tasty.
love it. I think everyone shares your love for Snickers.
I
Okay, I think we'll
know.
get started. And it's also fun. Oh, they said they lost audio. Can everyone hear us?
Hope
Let's
so.
see. I hope so. Um, yes, I
Okay.
can hear you. Okay, perfect.
Okay,
Wonderful.
perfect.
Okay, thank you for letting us know. I am Steph, and I lead community and mission here at Bobby. We are so glad you could join us today for this conversation on first year feeding, from formula to solids and beyond, and with Little Spoon, such an amazing company. And I wish I had a little bit more of this when I was getting started. So I'm
Mhm.
so grateful to have you all here. And we'll be joined with Mallory, who's already introduced herself, and she talked about her Snickers love, and she'll be kicking it off. She's
Mhm.
Bobby's education lead, and she's also known as the famous Formula Mom. And she'll be kicking off this webinar today. Take it
All
away,
right.
Mallory.
Thank you so much. We're so excited to lead this today. I'll be joined by Stephanie Middleberg, who you'll hear a little bit more about in a minute, but we just wanted to take the opportunity to welcome you. As Stephanie said, this is first year feeding formula and solids to be formula to solids and beyond with Bobby and Little Spoon. And the goal of this session is to help you feel empowered for what feeding looks like throughout your baby's first year, from milk to purees to table food, baby-led weaning to transitioning from formula or breast milk and to milk or milk alternative, all of those good questions. We really want this to feel collaborative, to feel conversational, to be as helpful for you as possible. So please feel free, use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. If you have questions, we will have time at the end to do a Q&A. You can also use the chat feature because we want you to be able to leave with confidence and feel like you spent an hour, you've given us an hour of your time, and you come away with actionable tips to help make your feeding journey easier. And then, of course, a disclaimer: what we talk about today is meant for educational and informational purposes only. It is not meant to be medical advice, because Stephanie and I are not doctors, and more importantly, we are not your child's doctor, and you are always going to know your baby best. So please, if you pick up any tips or strategies that you're unsure about, please discuss them with your pediatrician before you implement. All right, Stephanie, I'm going to hand it over to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, guys. I'm a registered dietitian and a founder of my own private practice, Middleburg Nutrition, which is in New York City, but these days virtual. So I work with people all over the country and world even, which has been phenomenal. I'm a mom of two. So I have a boy who's 10 and I have a little girl who's 7. And funny enough, and I'm the author of 3 books. My first book, the big book of organic baby food. I wrote literally while I was introducing solids to my son. So I was writing it as I was doing it and living it. And then when he became more of a picky toddler, I was writing my second book, the big book of organic toddler food. And then my most recent book that came out a few years ago was the big book of pregnancy nutrition. So it was almost a prequel. So taking you from pregnancy through family eating, essentially. I also work with a lot from consulting and advising, a lot of brands that I think are really changing the game and making an impact in this space. One of which is Little Spoon. I really think it's phenomenal. I've been with them through the start to see what they've been creating and helping parents along the way. I think is amazing. And I live in Brooklyn, New York, with my kids and my husband. Happy to be here.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Stephanie. And Steph, not to be confused with Stephanie, gave me a brief introduction, but I'm Mallory. I lead education at Bobby, and I'm the founder of the Formula Mom, which is an online educational space dedicated to providing information and support to formula feeding parents. I also have a book coming out in February all about formula feeding. It's called Bottle Service. It is available for pre-order now. If you're in the stage where you're still expecting or your baby will still be a baby in February, it could be a good resource for you. And so Stephanie here is going to give us all the information about solids, and I'm here to give you all the information about milk and formula and what that process looks like throughout the first year. So today we've got a couple of different topics that we're going to cover, really that goes sort of on the timeline of birth through the first year. So I'm going to talk about formula a little bit, formula composition and ingredients. We'll talk intro to solids, key nutrients, ingredient quality, some common concerns parents have like allergens and how to prevent your baby from choking. We'll dive into feeding schedules and routines. We know this is a huge topic that parents always want information on, especially when you're trying to balance breastfeeding and formula feeding and also meals or snacks or like naps. What does all that look like? And then we'll talk beyond the first year, how you transition away from bottles entirely or nursing, and then have time at the end for Q&A. All right, so I'm going to get started. Formula 101. What is formula? So formula is complete nutrition for ages 0 to 1, and it's used as a complement or a substitute for breast milk. This means that what we find in formula is modeled after the nutrition or the composition that we see in breast milk. 3 different types of formula that you may be familiar with. We call these different formula formats. So liquid ready to feed, powdered formula, which is the most common. It also tends to be the most affordable, most widely available. And then liquid concentrate formula, which used to be very popular. It comes in cans. You mix it a 1-to-1 ratio with water. It has really fallen out of favor. I have not seen anybody use concentrate formula in a very long time. So generally speaking, you're going to use either ready to feed or powder. Ready to feed is recommended if your baby is premature, if they're immunocompromised, if they're a brand new newborn because it is sterile. So it's a little more protective for their brand new immune systems. And then many folks switch to powder formula as their baby approaches 8 weeks, 12 weeks. You can also use powder before that if you sterilize it. So if you boil the water, add your powder to the boiled water while it's still hot, and that kills off any microbes that may be inside. And then really what parents want to know, what's in formula, right? We hear a lot of questions or concerns about ingredient quality or about toxins or bad ingredients. You know, there's a current cultural zeitgeist right now about seed oils, which are in formula. So a brief overview of what you can find in formula, because truly everything that's in formula is there because it's modeled after a nutrient that exists in breast milk. So you've got your macros in formula, fats, carbs, and protein. The ratio of fats, carbs, and proteins is, again, what we see in breast milk. So 50% of the calories in formula and breast milk come from fat, 40% come from carbohydrates, roughly 10% come from protein. And you'll notice there's a ton of fat and carbs because our babies are growing so fast. They're growing at a faster rate during 0 to 1 than at any other developmental period in the lifespan. So they need a ton of fat, especially for brain growth, and a ton of carbs to support all of their growing and moving, especially. I listed some sources here of where formulas tend to pull those nutrients. So you might get fat from milk fat, you might get it from coconut oil, you might get carbs from lactose, which is naturally occurring milk sugar, both in breast milk and cow's milk, or you might get it from alternative sources like sucrose or maltodextrin. And then protein typically comes from either cow's milk or goat's milk, in some cases soy, but you might also see something called protein hydrolysates, which are broken down proteins that are easier to digest, or even free amino acids if you have a baby with an allergy or metabolic condition or malabsorption disorder who might need something a little more specialized. So that is your quick and dirty overview of formula. The last thing I'll say before I pass it to Stephanie and we start talking about solids and the balance is that sometimes I hear from parents and they're concerned because they look at the back of the formula container and there's a whole bunch of words they don't recognize. And we've been taught, especially if you're in the space where you prioritize organic or you prioritize clean, we've been taught you shouldn't eat things that you can't pronounce. And then you pick up your formula, you look at the back, and it's full of a whole bunch of things like ferrous sulfate and cholecalciferol. And you're like, what is that? And so I wanted to encourage you, those are just the scientific names of vitamins and minerals. So ferrous sulfate is iron, cholecalciferol is vitamin D. The things that you see on the back of your can might sound scary, but they're really not. They're just the names of the micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals that we know your baby needs. So that's my encouragement for you today. All right, Stephanie, take it away. Introducing
Thank
solids.
you, Mallory. I always like love hearing you talk about formula because I think it's so interesting and I think it's really misunderstood. I don't think enough people really understand what goes into it, the formulation, and how it gets created to mimic that of breast milk. So I always think it's super informative. Okay, intro to solids. Love this topic, but let's just jump. There's so much to cover, I think, in this space, and I truly understand, especially when I was writing this book as a parent myself 10 years ago, how specific and how much like hand holding we need at this stage. So I will try to get as specific as possible without knowing each person individually, but also just know, having said that like each baby is going to have its own journey. So please don't be hard on yourself. Some babies are going to be quick to pick up and love food from the start, and others are going to be slower. And just remember, it is not a race. This is a marathon. We all end up in the same spot. We are here to help with this transition, which can seem quite scary, and I get it. Just in terms of signs of readiness, so you might go to your pediatrician, have a conversation. I think they still say between 4 to 6 months. I personally think that 4 months is young, so I like to see it closer
Agreed.
to the 5 to 5.5 to 6 months. But look for signs of readiness. So you want to have good head and neck control so they can sit without support there. They sit upright with minimal support. So you actually want to put them in your high chair just to make sure they don't
like flop over. Yep.
Which happens.
Yeah.
So you want them to have that's really important because I mean that also becomes, we'll talk about it, a choking hazard clearly. So we want them to have that be developmentally ready. Super important, they show interest in food. So I don't know about you, Mallory, but like literally my kids were like,
yes.
chasing the food, reaching for the food, they'd be at the table and it was clearly they wanted to take ingest it in some point. And then also the ability to start to like reach for objects and bring them to your mouth is going to be super important there as well. So those are really the stages. And then the setup, we don't really have it here, but it's pretty simple, right? It's a high chair, it's a splat mat because it will get messy.
Yes.
And like let them get messy. I think just remember that food play is learning. So them squishing, them squeezing, even throwing is all developmental and it's all part of it. So try not to like clean them as they're going. Just just succumb to the mess and then strip them and then,
I love
have
that.
them.
Succumb to the mess. Yes.
Yeah, succumb to the mess because I think that's part of it and honestly will be part of the fun there. But you just need a splat mat. Some people like to have like a silicone bib, a silicone cup. We'll get into that. But I think a loading spoon is nice. So there's lots of brands like Num Num, for example. So it's different than a scoop spoon. It's like they can start to pick up like food and feed it to themselves. It's easier. So again, it's not a ton of equipment. And then I always say your phone. So you're going to take lots of cute
So many
videos and
pictures. Yes.
of the experience.
Mhm.
Um, let's talk about first foods. So I put on here purees plus baby-led weaning because there are two schools of thought that often compete against each other, and I don't think they need to be an and or. They can totally be a combo. In fact, I encourage it. So
Mhm.
purees, we'll go through the stages, but purees is when you're really blending things and it's a very smooth texture and it's typically thought of with being spoon fed. Baby-led weaning is really more of whole food, so you're skipping the puree. It's whole foods that your child is ingesting. And we'll get to a next slide about sort of pros and cons of each, but I really you could do both. Have them have
Mhm.
a puree of mashed sweet potato and then have them have a piece of sweet potato. I think kids gravitate towards either or they can gravitate towards both. So give them the
Mhm.
opportunity to explore both if you can. So as I said, I don't think it has to be one way or the other. I think you can do a complete combo, and that's up
Mhm.
to you and your comfort level. Um, first foods, again, you can have fun with it. I always like avocado is sort of a fun one because it's like somewhat of a neutral taste, but pears, sweet potatoes, broccoli, carrots, cauliflower, any of these seem really great options. And in terms of amounts, we'll get to it a little bit more, but it's really for those first, especially months, like first few months,
Mhm.
it's really minimal. I mean, they're going to probably get more on them they are going to get in them.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't worry. I wouldn't, don't focus on the actual consumption part of it. We're not there yet. Just
Mhm.
have want it to be fun for them and you want to explore. So it might be a teaspoon, it might be a tablespoon of food
Mhm.
of food, but also let them lead. So this is
Mhm.
where we really have to trust the babies that they do have a sense of how much that their body needs and how much they want to consume. So most importantly, when we talk about the baby-led weaning or in feeding, you want them to be in control of it, not in control of what, but how much. And you want them to be independent eaters. So if you're doing the purees, even the purees, like hand them the spoon so they can start to
Mhm.
get a sense. Put some of the food on their tray or on their mat so they can start to explore. And again, it's good developmentally, it's good for them pacing themselves and having that fullness cue. So that's
Mhm.
whether you're doing baby-led weaning or purees, to me, the most important is that they do become more independent eaters. So they're not like 2 years old and you're following them around with a spoon, which I've seen a lot.
Mhm. It almost reminds me what we as adults, we're all trying to get back to intuitive eating, to eating when we're
Yeah.
hungry and stopping when we're full. And I find that when we give our babies that grace of trusting that they're full when they are acting full and that we should feed them when they're acting hungry, that's a great way to set that pattern from the very beginning of intuitive eating so they don't hopefully have to come back in adulthood and figure it out later.
100%. And I say this will happen when they get a little bit older, but I also tend to say we tend to hyper focus on the day and the amount that they consumed in one meal of the day. And I say to zoom out the lens and really focus in on the week. Because even as adults, there's
Mhm.
some days that we're like, I'm just like, I want more protein on this day, or I'm just
Mhm.
craving this type of food on this day. So zoom out the lens and really more focus on the week than
Mhm.
like hyper focusing on the day or per meal.
Yeah.
And I feel like that will be really helpful just from you know,
Mhm.
a mind space perspective there. I just want to have a little note about rice cereal because I don't love it as, some pediatricians still recommend it as a first food because it's safe and it's fortified with
Mhm.
iron. I just don't love it as a first food because first of all, it's bland. So if that's what you're introducing
Yeah.
to your child, they're like, this is food. I'd rather there be something
Mhm.
more interesting and flavorful. And the iron that's fortified in the rice cereal is not as more the most absorbable form anyway. So I'd
Mhm.
rather get it from other forms, which we'll talk about. And also there can be some contaminants in it, but that's at least of my concern. But I would say try and start with some fruits or vegetables or fatlet, avocado, something along
Mhm.
those lines. And just in general, the three P's as you're going through this is patience, because they might reject something and
Mhm.
one day, but don't take it off the list. Don't that I think that's a big no for me is also like, oh, I fed my, son carrots and he doesn't like it, and then you don't feed it again.
Mhm.
They will change so many times and through toddlerhood. So
Mhm.
if something is rejected, keep trying it. It can take up to 20 exposures. You just never know. So continue to put that into the mix.
Mhm.
And then we can talk about you can also introduce it in a different way with some different flavors and seasonings and things of that nature. Play. So again, I'm saying let them play, have fun with it. And then it is going to again be persistence, persistence, persistence.
Mhm.
So it's a lot of work, but with big payoff.
Yeah. All right. Tell us a little bit more about some of the pros and cons between these two sort of methodologies around introducing solids, purees and baby-led weaning.
Yeah. So when we're talking about baby-led weaning, we're sort of talking about this. It does encourage a little bit more self-regulation as the baby's in charge, what goes into their mouths, which is why I think it could be a pro for both, which is like, I think when people think of the purees again, like it's the parent that's feeding. So with the purees, I encourage the baby to try and feed themselves the best that they can. Again, because they're picking up food, it does help a little bit more with the fine motor skills, some exposure to textures and flavors, all of which again you can do with purees easily, but it just comes a little more natural with the baby-led weaning. And then again, the social eating, but it really doesn't work for all babies. Some babies don't like it. Some developmentally they're not ready for it. So again, if that really is becoming a concern, especially past like month 7, 8, when you really feel like they're not getting much in, I understand that I would talk to the pediatrician there about some
Mhm.
alternatives. But the purees are less intimidating for parents. It feels a little, you can control it more. It feels safer from like just, how much you're you're serving. It doesn't, you're not less concerned about the choking and the gagging and the implications about it. You can control, as I said, the texture progression through the various stages. I think it's easier. You can make it in bulk, right? You can make a lot of purees in bulk and freeze it, which is
Mhm.
my sort of book's main theme there. So you'll always have it stored. It's easy to take on the go. It's like, especially it's convenient when out and about, especially when you think of like, you can order a little spoon, right?
Mhm.
And like when you're traveling or you're staying at an Airbnb, you just order it for there. So you don't have to like think about going crazy. What am I feeding?
Mhm.
And it can be less mess as well. So I will say
Mhm.
with my son, we were all about the purees. And then my daughter, second child, but she just like was sitting in my lap and grabbed an asparagus spear and started to eat a bunch
You're
of
like,
purees.
okay, I guess we're doing this.
We're on. I was like, we're good. And yes, and I've written a whole book about purees. So here we go.
Yeah. And I will
So
say, I was just gonna say, I appreciate your approach that you can absolutely do both. Like we, for my kids, did baby-led weaning at home when I knew, that there wasn't too much sodium or that, I liked the ingredients or the sourcing. But if we were out to eat and I was eating like tacos and fries and I didn't necessarily know I wanted that much sodium for our baby, then we would bring the purees. And for that meal, they would have purees. And it really can be as flexible as you want it or need it to be.
100%, I couldn't agree more. Absolutely.
Awesome. All right. So some questions that we know parents have around how do you make sure that what you're giving your baby is what they need and what you want in terms of quality?
Okay. Yeah. So I want to like quickly go through the various important nutrients. Mallory, you talked about fat that's in
Mhm.
formula, right? And it being breast milk, 50%,
Mhm.
like 50% or a little bit more, but fat is
Mhm.
really important in the feeding process, right? So it's important, the essential fatty acids for brain development. It helps for the absorption of nutrients. If you think about
Mhm.
fat-soluble nutrients, A, D, E, K, they need fat for absorption. It's for hormone health, for satiety. Fat is really important. So I will say as you go through this journey, please don't ever, you don't need to do low fat or fat-free for
Mhm.
anything at any time. Um, at all. So when we think about with the introduction of solids, you can start to add things like ghee and butter and olive oil and coconut oil to your foods when you're cooking it, both in the puree and if you're doing, say, like a chunk of sweet potato or broccoli or something along
Mhm.
those lines. It will make it more flavorful. So there are lots of advantages for having, including these fats. Iron is huge. So by
Mhm.
4 to 6 months, baby's iron stores really deplete. So we want to make sure that we do meet this through fortification, through the diet, if possible. Now, heme, which is animal protein, is the most absorbable forms of iron. So this, if you actually think this is really going to come from meat and poultry and fish, it's going to be the most absorbable. So if you think about them gnawing on a beef patty or ultimately gnawing on like a lamb chop
Mhm.
bone or a chicken thigh bone or some soft meats as they progress into like a beef stew. But also smushing. But then you do have the plant-based ones like beans and tofu are
Mhm.
incredible sources, lentils. So you can smash them, you can puree them. We can add seeds like ground up seeds like hemp hearts and sesame seeds and pumpkin seeds, and that can all be, pureed tofu or tofu's quite soft in its own form as well. So those are wonderful sources of iron. So I would think about as you progress to think about trying to get like 1 to 2 sources of
Mhm.
iron a day. That becomes incredibly important. If you feel like you can't get it in, I would talk to your pediatrician about some fortification. Speaking of fortification, vitamin D. So this is especially important for breastfed babies because you're really not getting the vitamin D. For formula fed babies, you're really fine, but breastfed babies are going to need a roughly 400 IUs. That probably might not mean anything to anyone, of vitamin D. You can get it in drops. There's a lot of great brands. For little ones, I like Mary's Ruth Organics, just
Mhm.
giving them a shout out. But
Bobby
you
has
can,
one too.
oh, they,
Yes, this is
I,
relatively new. Yeah. Organic
Oh, I
vitamin D
didn't know
drops.
that. There you go.
Hmm.
So smart. And then you can put that, you can mix into food, you can mix into a bottle. I mean, there's so much that it's sort of really the ease of this. But vitamin D is important for your immune system, is important for your bones, is important, I mean, for your, again, hormone production. We're actually thinking we need more and more vitamin D as the kids get
Hmm.
older in this day and age of just how helpful it is for everyone. Then we have choline and DHA, again, all for brain health. Choline is like DHA is an EPA or omegas that when you guys were, in pregnancy, you're probably taking hopefully a DHA and
Hmm.
EPA, perhaps. I mean, some people it's hard to take because it can be fishy and come up and repeat on them.
Yeah.
Um, Choline is becoming just as important as we're learning through the data for brain development as DHA. Choline is really found in eggs, liver, but again, meats, tofu, beans, a lot of sources there. If anyone's pregnant on watching this, you really do want a prenatal that has choline in it. If not, you can take choline on the sides, but not all prenatals have choline. So really try and seek that out, and you want one that has DHA and EPA. But if you're consuming the DHA and EPA, think about fatty fish, so like salmon, sardines, anchovies, and they might sound gross, but like if you start it young with kids, they eat it. They can eat it. They'll eat it. So even if you as a parent don't like it, still try and offer it to your kid. It's the one time that modeling might not apply.
Yeah.
But yes, try and get that in. And then probiotics. So I'm a big fan of probiotics, especially for the kids that might have been on antibiotics super young, or if, say, you were breastfeeding and you had mastitis and you needed to be on
Mhm.
antibiotics, it might be a good idea to give your baby and yourself some probiotics. If there's moderate to severe eczema, another reason, a lot of times these are gut health issues. So I find it really supportive to add some good probiotics in supplement form. There's, again, lots of, I don't know if Bobby has a probiotic, but
We do. Yes.
two.
We
Okay.
do. Just those two, vitamin D and probiotics.
Okay, there we go. You can get it all in one from Bobby. But I think again, it's probably a powdered form or
Ours
just
are
a
drops.
fine drops
Mhm.
or powdered form. Either way, I think they can be really helpful if you're going through this. Again, a shout out to those who are pregnant who are watching this. I really think in the third trimester, or at least most women
Mhm.
should be taking a probiotic, because even for kids and babies, it can help reduce the likelihood of these chronic diseases in kids, like eczema, asthma, allergies. So anytime we can build up good gut health. You can also, yogurt is a great source of probiotics. There's lots of cottage cheese now, like good
Mhm.
culture that has added probiotics. Fermented veggies have
Yeah,
probiotics.
sauerkraut. Yeah.
Yeah, you can definitely get it through diet, but for a lot of babies, not a lot, but for specific babies and for parents, I do recommend even supplementing with additional probiotics. Um, okay, moving on to textures. So this will be slightly different with, if we're doing, let's start with like purees. If we're doing purees, just the first, when you're introducing it, like it should be fairly thin and slide off the spoon if you're
I
having
like
it.
that
Like I
visual.
recommend,
Yeah.
oh, oh yeah. Oh, I thought you said you had visual.
Yeah,
When
just the
I
visual is
literally,
helpful.
my son and I put it in the book, we like bought a baby food jar. It was before Little Spoon was that. And we like compared what we were making to the baby food. Like we were that, you're like precise about it. But that's
Mhm.
really what you're doing at the beginning. And then you can really move on if you think about like sort of stage two to like a Greek yogurt texture that's a lot thicker. And then moving on to like definitely chunky purees and finely
Mhm.
chopped pureed type of food mixed in with like actual food
Mhm.
that babies can grab. When we're talking about more baby-led weaning, when you start, you want larger soft pieces of food versus the little guys, because you don't have the pincher grasp, which is their ability to like pick up little food until probably 9 months, depending on the child. So think about like two fingers worth of of a portion, right? So again, I keep using like a sweet potato or a banana or avocado pieces or tofu where they're grabbing it.
Mhm.
Again, a big stock of broccoli. That's what it looks like. It's bigger for them to pick up on, and it's soft, and they can gnaw on it. And then eventually, when they get to more 9 to 11 months, you're cutting it smaller so that they can have the ability to pick it up, and they can actually have the ability to manipulate it around in the mouth, and swallow it and consume it. So we didn't put on here, but choking hazards. So no honey before age one.
Mhm.
And then we like things like nuts and grapes and hot dogs,
Popcorn. Yeah.
popcorn. Those are all discouraged
Mhm.
before the age of one, as they are, yeah,
Mhm.
choking hazards. And then
Yeah.
and then it's really important also quality. I'm sure a lot of people, which is why they're fans of Little Spoon
Mhm.
Bobby, because they are aligned in that. I really like, in anything that you do, try and find third party certification, because I think that's really, it's like a third party that's going
Mhm.
to be testing and looking out for the product. Because so Clean Label Project is one that's really important to look at. They test for over 400, I think, um,
Mhm.
contaminants, which is pretty amazing. So they can get that certification on it. So both Bobby and Little
Mhm.
Spoon have that certification. Because obviously, if you're making your own food, you're controlling it, but still you can't control everything, so you don't know what's in
Yeah.
those foods. But this is especially concerns, I think, with all of these. I think there was even a report yesterday of another company that had like high levels of lead or something in their
Mhm.
baby food.
Yeah. I feel like every other week there's
Yeah.
there's a report about it. So Clean Label Project is always my go-to sort of independent third party testing certification that I tell parents to look for. And they certify all sorts of things, obviously Bobby and Little Spoon, but other food products, personal care products, lotions and sunscreens. And they do a variety of different testing, a purity award, a pesticide-free certification, a first 100 days,
Yes,
sort
that's
of deal.
newish.
So
Yeah.
absolutely check them out. It's like cleanlabelproject.com, or you can find them on Instagram. But that to me always just provides such a measure of peace, because I know that like they have done the hard work of vetting and I
Yes.
can trust them and know that it's like, we're not going to get a large heavy metal load. We're not going to get synthetic pesticides. We're not going to get hormones, antibiotics. They've tested for microplastics and phthalates and all of that stuff that we don't want for our babies. And so it's nice to be able to just like put a check mark in that column, like they've tested for it, I can trust them, we're good.
Yes, 100%. I also like the environmental working group. So when you think
Yeah.
about, they do the Dirty Dozen and the Clean
Mm-hmm.
15. So when we're just specifically talking about food, if you're not familiar with that, so the Dirty Dozen, and it changes every year slightly. So they have a new report every year, but it's
Mm-hmm.
those fruits and vegetables that have the most pesticides. So if you're thinking of like, where do I sort of put my attention to buying organic, you want the Dirty Dozen would be a good place. And then they have the Clean 15. So the other 15 fruits and vegetables that
Mm-hmm.
have less pesticides. So it has a little bit of a ranking system. So it helps direct as well.
Mm-hmm.
And they do other things like sunscreens, personal care products,
Mm-hmm.
and things of that nature as well. And then always you want to go on their websites to see like what their studies are,
Mm-hmm.
their transparency,
Yes.
what their standards are, any testing studies
Mm-hmm.
that they've done, because again, if it's a good product, they will be transparent. Shouldn't be
Yes,
that hard to find,
absolutely. Yes.
is
And
what
I
I,
know at the end of this presentation, we have a link out to Little Spoon's transparency
yes.
guidelines.
Yeah.
And we have that on our Bobby website as well. Because I think you're right. If you're making quality product, you don't have anything to hide about your sourcing, about your processing, about your packaging. And
Yes.
parents deserve to know that.
And yeah, Little Spoon does, I think, have the strictest standards
Mhm.
right now in the United States.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, top concerns. And then after this, I think we're going to go into schedules, which is always a big one.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Introducing allergens. I have a child with food allergies, my son, Julian. And it's really tricky and it's really scary when it happens. And the science has changed since he was born, but it's really early introductions, especially for peanuts and egg. So we're talking around like 6 months, 4 to 6 months. Again, 4 months is, I think, could be a little early. But you can either, and it's first of all, when you introduce the allergen, so the studies, you're introducing it early so that you have less chances can reduce the likelihood of
Mhm.
developing it, right? This allergy as the kid gets older. However, if there is severe eczema, that is sort of the one thing that like contact your doctor and talk about it, because they might have you do it, because it often can be affiliated with a food allergy, so they
Right.
might want to do it in the office with them. I always say introduce an allergen early in the morning. So
Mhm.
that would be like a morning feed. So your pediatrician's office is open. If something happens, right, you can call
Mhm.
someone if you notice something. And usually it will happen, a reaction will happen within the first like 10 to 15 minutes. And that's going to be like hives, it's going to be some itching, that might be some swelling. And hopefully not, it won't be any trouble breathing or something anaphylactic of that nature. You're giving a small amount of something. So like think about like the peanut butter, you can dilute it a little with water. It's like eighth of a teaspoon. You can mix it into a puree, something along those lines, and then you're waiting. So that's what that would look like. An egg, eggs I think are a little easier. You could just do like a little egg omelet, a little scrambled
Mhm.
egg. It's super soft, but it's really just a small amount, one at a time. Right.
Mhm.
So you're not going to do two allergens at a time. This is definitely where you want to space it out. And
Mhm.
then if it all is fine, then you want to continue consistently doing these allergens, which is tricky because you're like,
Mhm.
oh my God, I have to like just think about feeding, but let alone
Yeah.
like think about how often to introduce these allergens. So ideally it's at least twice a week, and you can
Mhm.
bring up the portions. um, safely. There are the top 9 allergens we have there, like milk, the dairy, that becomes easier in form in
Hmm.
terms of like the yogurt or right, some soft
Yeah,
cheeses or something.
cheese. Yeah.
Yeah. Soy could be tofu. Tree nuts would be some other like nut butters or really smashing it and mixing it. The wheat would be bread, like, soft.
Mm.
That's somewhat easy. And shellfish is usually like a little later because it's like not later, but I feel like that always sort of becomes like the last on the list because it's like
Mhm.
less compatible and the science really isn't as strong as the other ones for early introduction, shellfish
Mhm.
specifically. There is a brand called Ready Set Food that
Mhm.
is an allergen introduction. Uh, they have specific stages of powder, so you can mix it in into like they have their own oatmeal that has all 8 allergens, but they take it by stages of all the allergens,
Mhm.
which can be really helpful for a lot of parents when it can be overwhelming. So it's really like a
Mhm.
nice schedule. So that's something that I would look out for as well. Other concerns is choking and gagging. So the big thing to
Mhm.
note is, and I do think everyone should get a CPR course because
Mhm.
I did it. I don't know when you did it, Mallory, but I did it when I was like
Mhm.
pregnant, and I just felt like that was too early. I feel like I had pregnant.
I also
I,
did it pregnant, and not only was it too early, but like trying to like do the chest compressions and you've got a big belly and like you can't catch your breath. I was like, this was a bad idea.
yeah, you're so ru not rushed, but you're like, I got to do all
Yeah.
the things. I got to do all the things, and then like
Mhm.
by the time the baby's born, I was like, I don't remember what I learned.
Yes.
So But choking is silent. That's the big difference.
Mhm.
Gagging has noise. Gagging is part of development. That's how they learn. It's super scary, but try not to put your like finger in the mouth, sort of just sit there calmly. Like you might notice they might vomit, like an open mouth, like tongue out. They might get a little red, but if they're coughing and they're making loud noises, like that's a sign that they're actually getting air and oxygen and they're just going
Mhm.
to regurgitate it out. The choking is less common, but obviously it's super serious. So it's like sometimes it's like they're really fearful, they're gasping for air, it could be quiet or like you could see pulling in the neck. I mean, obviously you want to that's why you want to take the CPR course and really take action when that happens. As I said, it feels super scary, but it really is not all that common. But that's why you also want to have safety measures of them like sitting in their high chair. You want to be you're sitting with them when they're eating. So I know it's so tempting to like do other cleanup or what have you, but you
Mhm.
really want to sit with them so you can see what's going on and be experiencing with them. Um, and then I just want to touch on a little bit of like picky eating. So this is the time like kids are there's a flavor window really up to 18
Mhm.
months where they're so much more susceptible to try new flavors. So my book, the organic baby food book, I have a whole list of like get herbs and spices, not spicy foods, but think of like
Mhm.
thyme and ginger and cinnamon and cardamom, like get all these flavors in the best that you can. It's really amazing that you would think that like what kids might reject, they actually quite enjoy real flavors. So
Mhm.
this is the time to experiment with that and just keep mixing it up. This is why sometimes like having like an outside source, like a little spoon can help you do that because they have like tons of different offerings.
Mhm.
But try and do get a diversity, even in yogurts. Like try to not
Mhm.
just have one specific type of yogurt. So even within a genre, try and mix it up so kids don't get so stuck on, I need this one. This is the only brand
Mhm.
of yogurt that I will eat and I will identify. A lot of that comes down to role modeling. So they're going to learn, have them sit at the table. They're just going to learn so much from seeing you interact with
Mhm.
food and eat with food. And again, try not to stress about what they're consuming if they reject something. That is part of the process. So I think as soon as stress, they will pick up on that, and that
Mhm.
will only get harder. So try and still just make it playful and fun and stay neutral. If introducing new foods, it's not like try this here, take one more spoon of that. You plate the new food and you just let them explore and handle it how they want
Mhm.
to.
Amazing. All right, feeding schedules. Stephanie and I had so much fun being collaborative on this because this really merges our two areas.
Yeah.
So here at the top is the general breakdown of what's recommended by age, 6 to 8 months, 9 to 10 months, 10 to 12 months. Um, I find that a lot of parents get really excited about introducing solids. It's new, it's novel, and a lot of them will try to jump to 3 meals and 2 snacks a day when their baby is 6 months old. And you don't have to do that. So give yourself some grace. You don't have to go full speed ahead. This can be a very gradual process. You're gradually increasing how much you're offering in terms of solids. You're slowly decreasing over that last 6 months how much formula or breast milk you're offering and how many of those milk feedings per day. So these are some sample schedules here. You'll notice that we just have the milk feedings, breast milk or formula, and the solid feedings here. We don't have naps because they're so variable, person to person, baby to baby. So you'll want to fit your naps in between these. The key thing to note here
Yeah.
is that as you're moving up, you're typically dropping one of those milk feedings as you go into the next age category, and you're typically adding a solids feeding while you're doing that. So 6 to 8 months, this sample schedule has 5 milk feedings, 2 solids. 9 to 10 months has 4 milk feedings, 3 solids. 11 to 12 months has 3 milk feedings, 3 solids, and a snack. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like this, like your ship's passing, your solids are going up, and then your formula is going down.
And it really happens naturally, but also you're most likely gonna be taking away, I guess, a feeding during the day. So like in the
Mhm.
beginning, you'll see you're really like keeping up the morning and night continue to be super important
Mhm.
feedings. And then when you do introduce solids, it's typically in a window between like 30 minutes to maybe an hour after that first feeding.
Mhm.
So you want them like hungry, but you also want them awake and happy. They're going to be most
Mhm.
likely enjoying it. I mean, that could, for some, that might be dinner. It doesn't have to be like breakfast. You're like, I want that the first solids to be like all around as long as it's not an allergen.
Mhm.
And then we want
Yeah.
that early. But it really is the middle feedings that those are the ones that start
Mhm.
to fade, and you start to you continue to keep the
Mhm.
morning and evening.
Yeah. And because we want breast milk or formula to be the primary source of nutrition during that
Right.
first year, the
Yes.
overall amount of breast milk or formula that you're giving likely won't change too much. The AAP's recommendation is 24 to 32 ounces during the first year. So as you're decreasing the number of bottles, you may see that the volume in each bottle increases. So at 6 months, you might be doing 5 5-ounce bottles. At 10 months, you might be doing 4 7-ounce bottles. At 12 months, you might be doing 3 8-ounce bottles, so you're still within that range, but tend to be consolidating higher volumes, lower frequency, which sets the stage to once you're past 12 months, then you're down to typically 2 8-ounce milk feedings a day. We're going to talk about your milk options after you transition away from formula breast milk, which is in line with the AAP's roughly 16 ounces of milk a day recommendation.
Yeah.
Anything else here?
No, we're good. We might have questions, but for
Yes. Okay, beyond year one. So weaning from bottles, all of the various regulatory and public health guidance organizations recommend being done with bottles by 18 months, solely because after 12 months, it can start to affect oral motor development, the positioning of your baby's teeth. I always recommend that if your baby is still wanting milk before their nap or before bed, you can swap the milk to cups instead of bottles. And the key here is to stay consistent. Like your baby might put up a fuss about it, but ultimately you just have to be the one in charge to say, we are done with bottles now because it's for your benefit.
I will say, just as
And
an add-on with the cup, you can start to introduce that as you're
oh
introducing
my
solids.
gosh. Yes, like starting at 6 months. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's and not milk in the cup. We're talking water.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
they know what they start to be able to learn how to drink. So by the time we get here, it's and you're um the cup might change, right? As they get older, they might have a straw, but that open cup will really start to introduce
Hmm.
it at 6 months. So they get used to drinking from that earlier, just to help with the
Hmm.
transition.
Yeah. And I know, I'm always talking to parents about what do you put in the cup. So AAP recommends whole cow's milk, large part because it has all that good fat that babies need. If you don't want cow's milk, they recommend soy milk. But we're also seeing, I don't want to call it a trend because I think it's a totally reasonable option, but we're seeing some parents that choose to forego milk entirely and they're sourcing those nutrients from other sources. What advice would you give a parent who's like, I'm just not really into the idea of cow's milk?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few options. One, there's goat milk,
Hmm.
which is easier just to digest. My son actually, because he had severe eczema, we did goat milk from him,
Hmm.
and that really was amazing because it actually does have a lot of nutrition, but it's easier
Hmm.
to digest. So that is one great option. My
Hmm.
advice is, yeah, also my daughter, like, just this is speaking personally, my daughter was like, I don't want any milk. She's like,
You're like,
I
okay.
just yeah, I don't like it, but she loved yogurt. We just made sure, and I do think that's fine, but you should talk to your pediatrician or a feeding specialist, a dietitian to make sure
Hmm.
you are meeting because the if you're not doing a soy or a goat milk, the other milks just don't have a lot of nutrition, right? They're
Hmm.
you're just not going to be you're not getting that protein, especially
Hmm.
from like a oat milk. And then it becomes hard because there are allergens there
Hmm.
too.
Like almond
So
milk and all that. Yeah.
there's correct. So if you can't do nuts, and
Hmm.
then you can't do dairy, which are say two
Hmm.
common allergens, you can be in a
Hmm.
tough position. There is actually one that I love. It's a Kiki milk, which is
Mm.
actually high nutrition.
Okay. Oh no, I might be frozen for a minute. Oh dear.
That again has the calcium and has
Yeah.
good proper nutrition.
Hmm.
So I really like that as an option because I do find that as a parent that had food allergies, that
Hmm.
was that can be like a frustrating space because
Yeah.
there are not a lot of great options if
Hmm.
when you're dealing with
Yeah.
that. But again, you can make it up. It doesn't have to be in that milk form. You can make it
Hmm.
up with other nutrients and maybe some fortification. You just have to be on
Hmm.
top of it and talk to a professional about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we've got about 10 minutes for Q&A. I've been watching the questions like tick up in the in the chat and in the Q&A
Oh, I
box.
haven't seen any of them.
That maybe I don't know. Um,
I
okay,
see them.
I'm just gonna grab some of these for you.
Yeah, perfect. That's great.
Do you do you have any advice about what probiotic strains you recommend?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, it does de so it that just speaking about what issue it is, right? So I guess if we're talking about
Hmm.
constipation issue, if we're talking you were taking antibiotics, like Florastor is good after taking antibiotics, you would take that for three
Hmm.
weeks. So there are different strains for different areas. Again, mixed in with you want to make sure it's third party tested and it's good quality. So I think it depends what the issue is going on. And a lot of the probiotics, the kids' ones are multi-strain.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so I guess yes, it depends on what the issue is. But other
Hmm.
brands, Bobby, Claire, I mean, it depends for kids. Bobby, Claire Labs, Seed has one. So again, ooh, got that box. It depends for kid, adult, what's going on for specifics, but that's where more of the science is
Hmm.
going for specific strains.
Yeah,
Just
specific strains for that target specific challenges or issues. Yeah,
yes.
absolutely. Okay. Does gagging and coughing mean that baby-led weaning is not a good fit for your baby?
Really good question. Not necessarily at all. Again, that's totally part of the process. But if it's happening like all the time, especially as they get a little bit like older, that is where I would talk to a pediatrician about it because maybe they might want to see a feeding specialist.
Mhm.
Maybe there's something sensory, something else that's going on that's not just about the texture of the food. But so I think it depends on the extent to how often and can you get through a meal ultimately without them coughing and gagging.
That makes sense. What is the best way to prepare and serve fish?
Oh, so it depends. Fish is soft, right? That's the good thing about
Hmm.
it. So if you're just like baking it simply baked, and again, you can put some seasoning on it, like thyme, oregano. You can do it like steam it in a parchment paper. That's a little bit more
Hmm.
fancy. But then you can add a little bit of the fat with it, and then serve it. I think that's delicious. And again, sort of bigger strips if you can. But it's obviously like a mushy food, but to them and they'll start to eat it. My daughter was obsessed with fish. You can also blend it. Some people think it's gross, but blend away. Blend
Yeah.
it, do fish, blend fish
Hmm.
with beans, or a
Hmm.
gravy combo with maybe some lentils. I mean, there's so much you can do with it that you think might be gross that work out like beautifully. And again, get the herbs and spices. So in my book, I have
Hmm.
a bunch of like fish purees. It's
Okay.
nice that
Yeah.
that's also the way that it's like one meal, one family you start to do. So if you're making a fish meal, right, cod, for example, then you can just take it
Hmm.
and put it in a blender and blend it for the little
Yeah.
one if you don't want to have them do the individual
Hmm.
foods. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that goes along. Someone asked, is it okay to season foods for a 9-month-old baby? Are there any seasonings you want to avoid? I mean, obviously, no excess salt.
Yeah, but I mean, you can have some salt,
Sure. Yeah.
for sure. I mean, it's also a flavor enhancement, but not an excess salt, exactly. I think that's where the point that it is. Nothing spicy. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but otherwise, no honey in the first year. But otherwise, yeah, cumin, garlic powder, onion powder, like do it up.
Hmm. Nice. Okay, someone has a question about how long to stay with one food before introducing another. If she's doing oatmeal now, how long should you do oatmeal before introducing something else? And I think this is not about allergens so much as just regular food introduction.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be like 3 days, introduce it for
Hmm.
3 days. Some people still do that, which is perfectly fine. That's your comfort level, but you don't have to. And some feel like it can slow
Hmm.
down the process. So I just feel like that's up to you. You can really do it honestly I like to like sort of have like a 2 day type of deal because I also like to make
Hmm.
extra habit, but like a day or two is totally fine. And then
Hmm.
you can then switch it up to the next food item you're introducing and then have fun with the oatmeal again. Add some cinnamon or ginger and
Hmm.
you start to add different mash in a banana with it. So and
Hmm.
then maybe put some coconut oil in it. So have
Hmm.
fun within the flavorings of the specific food as you go.
Hmm. Yeah, and that you just answered another question in here. Someone was asking about adding a fat source to foods if it's lacking. So yeah, you can add oil, you can add butter, you can add coconut oil. If you're serving pasta or something, add some butter in there, add some avocado oil. You can add the fat.
Yes. I used to like
Okay.
saute bananas with coconut oil and roast pears,
Hmm.
um,
Yum.
olive
Yeah.
oil. I know there's so many possibilities. But adding, yes.
Hmm.
But even in your purees, once you heat it up, so say you didn't make a puree with that and you heat it
Hmm.
up like you saute it, you can add fat to the pan and saute it there.
Great. Okay, thoughts on snacks and what are some examples of snacks that aren't like puffs, which obviously are not contributing much nutritionally?
Yeah, that can think about like snacks almost as like mini meals. It
Hmm.
doesn't have to be so different. So I think of it also as like yogurt or cottage cheese can be a snack. It
Hmm.
can be even like a piece of toast with like an avocado toast. That could be a
Hmm.
snack. It could be hummus. That could be like a little snack there. It could be even like a piece of egg. It could be you're making, a soft zucchini bread or something along those line, or like a little mini muffin.
Hmm.
That could be a snack. So I still think try and make it as real food
Hmm.
as possible. So
Yeah.
snacks sort of becomes it's like another mini meal, like AKA
Okay.
another mini meal at that stage is how
Hmm.
I sort of look at it at this
Hmm.
stage. I mean, obviously then you want things that might be on the go,
Hmm.
that might be in other ones, which is
Yeah.
cool because I think also Little Spoon is coming out with baby blends plus.
Hmm.
And I think those are some like pouches that are like fortified with like choline and omega-3s and things
Hmm.
of that
Okay.
nature. Yeah. What
Okay,
are
one
some
more.
any favorite snacks? that you
Oh
did?
man. Yes. Okay. One of my favorite was French toast. And if you obviously don't
Yeah.
serve it with syrup for your baby, but you've got your whole grains, you've got egg, you've got milk. You can add a dash of cinnamon, a little bit of vanilla, and then you've got your fiber, your protein, your dairy, your good fat. That was one of my favorites. And it freezes nicely too. So make a whole slice or two slices and then just cut off, two little strips and there's your snack. That was one of my favorites.
Yeah, and just the thing about like actually milk, so like you don't want to be up to the first year, you're not giving them
Hmm.
milk to drink, but
Yeah.
if it's like in a recipe, that's
Hmm.
fine.
Yeah.
So,
And you could also use formula for that too. You wouldn't want to count it towards your like daily formula total because the heat can, denature some of those nutrients, but you can absolutely use it. You can use it in mac and cheese. Like my kids are in elementary school. I still use formula in mac and cheese sometimes. Number one, because I have it on hand, but number two, it's more nutrient dense than the milk and they never notice. So you can do that
totally.
as well.
Yep.
Okay, we are right on the edge here. I know we had some questions that we didn't get to. Stephanie, tell us, where can people find you if they want to set up a
Yep.
consult or chat more?
Middleburgnutrition.com.
Mhm.
So you can just email, it's info@middleburgnutrition or Stephanie at either way gets to me. And then you
Mhm.
have my 3 books all at bookstores or
Mhm.
Amazon or Walmart or Target, wherever you like to purchase
Amazing.
books these days.
Amazing. And then on the Bobby side, we have a resource called the Feeding Room. It has on-demand videos. It has registration links to talk with an RN or an IBCLC or me or other feeding experts. And then we've got our little spoon information as well, including that link to the quality standards. So if you're interested in that, you can find more information there. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to Bobby and Little Spoon for sponsoring this. Thank you to all of you attending. We will be sending out this recording. So if you missed anything, you can go back and review. But I really appreciate it. This was so lovely.
Thanks for all the questions. And I always love them. Thank you. Thanks, Mallory.
Thank you.
Yep.
Have a great weekend.
All right. Bye, guys.